May 5th, 1940, Okinawa. The sun was setting over Hacksaw Ridge when the American forces retreated down the cliff face, leaving behind 75 wounded men. Command said they were lost, too dangerous to retrieve. The Japanese controlled the high ground. Artillery was raining down. Machine guns swept the escarpment. Every few minutes, any rescue attempt would be suicide. Private Desmond Doss heard this, looked at the cargo net hanging from the cliff edge, and made a decision that would change 75 families forever. He grabbed a rope, tied one end to a tree, and climbed back up, alone. This is the story of how one man saved 75 lives in a single night without firing a shot. How a soldier his own army called a coward became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. And how faith, rope, and a prayer, repeated 75 times, proved that courage doesn't always come from a gun. Desmond Doss didn't want to be a soldier. He wanted to be a medic. Born February 7th, in Lynchburg, Virginia. Seventh-day Adventist. Poor family. Father was a World War I veteran. Came back from France with shrapnel in his lungs and nightmares that never stopped. Drank to forget. Beat his wife when the memories got too loud. Young Desmond broke up one of those fights when he was 14. His father had a gun. His mother was screaming. Desmond grabbed the pistol from his father's hand and ran. Later that night, sitting on his bed with the gun in his lap, he read the 6th commandment. Thou shalt not kill. He made a decision, never, not for any reason. When Pearl Harbor was bombed on December 7th, every young man in Lynchburg lined up to enlist. Desmond was 22. He could have claimed conscientious objector status, stayed home, worked in the shipyard, avoided combat entirely. But that didn't feel right. His country was at war. Men were dying. He believed in serving. He believed in sacrifice. He just didn't believe in killing. So in April 1942, he enlisted as a medic. Army said medics didn't have to carry rifles if they had religious objections. Desmond thought that meant respect, understanding. He was wrong. Fort Jackson, South Carolina. Basic training, April 1942. The problem started immediately. Saturday was the Sabbath for Seventh-day Adventists. No work, no training. Desmond requested Sabbath observance. His sergeant, Sergeant Howell, thought he was looking for an easy way out. Told him if he wanted special treatment, he could scrub every latrine on base. Desmond scrubbed the latrines, then went to chapel, then showed up for Sunday training like nothing had happened. But the real trouble came during rifle qualification. Every soldier in the United States Army was required to qualify with the M1 Garand rifle. No exceptions. The Army didn't care if you were a cook, a clerk, or a medic. You carried a weapon. You knew how to use it. Desmond refused, not disrespectfully, not arrogantly. He just stood there on the firing line while every other man in his company loaded their rifles and fired downrange. When Sergeant Howell handed him an M1, Desmond said, "I can't, Sergeant. Can't or won't, Doss. I won't kill, Sergeant. The Bible says, I don't give a damn what the Bible says, Private. You will pick up that weapon and qualify, or I will have you court-martialed for refusing a direct order." Desmond didn't pick up the rifle. That night in the barracks, the beating started. His bunkmates threw boots at him, called him a coward, yellow-belly, traitor, said when they got to combat, they wouldn't cover him, said he'd get them all killed. One soldier, Private Glover, put a pillowcase over Desmond's head and beat him with a belt while the others watched. Desmond didn't fight back, didn't report it, just prayed. asked God for strength. The company commander, Captain Jack Glover, no relation to Private Glover, called Desmond into his office in June 1942. "Private Doss, you're making my life very difficult." "I'm sorry, sir. That's not my intention." "Your intention doesn't matter. You're a disruption. Your refusal to carry a weapon is demoralizing the other men. They think you're a coward." "I'm willing to serve, sir. I'll go wherever they go. I'll do whatever needs to be done. I just won't kill." "You can't have it both ways, Doss. Either you're a soldier or you're not. If you're not willing to fight, you don't belong in this army." "I'll fight, sir, just not with a gun." Captain Glover didn't understand. How could you fight without a gun? What good was a soldier who refused to kill the enemy? He recommended Desmond for psychiatric evaluation. Maybe the kid was mentally unfit. Maybe he had some kind of breakdown. That would be easier to explain than religious conviction. The psychiatrist interviewed Desmond for 2 hours, asked about his childhood, his father's violence, his faith, his motivations. At the end, the psychiatrist wrote, "Private Doss is psychologically sound. His beliefs are sincere. However, his presence in a combat unit represents a liability. Recommend discharge under Section 8, unsuitable for military service." But Desmond didn't want a discharge. He wanted to serve. His father, despite the drinking, despite the violence, had fought in World War I. Desmond respected that. He wanted to honor that legacy. Just in his own way, the case went up the chain. Battalion commander, regimental commander. Finally, Colonel Cooney at division headquarters reviewed the file. Cooney was about to approve the discharge when Desmond's father showed up. Tom Doss was a wreck of a man by 1940, alcoholic, unemployed, haunted by memories of trenches and mustard gas. But he loved his son, and he knew the Army was trying to push him out for being faithful. Tom brought a letter from a former commanding officer from World War I, a brigadier general, now retired. The letter explained that under Army Regulation AR 600-45, a soldier could serve without carrying a weapon if religious belief prohibited it. The regulation had been used for Quakers and Mennonites in World War I. It was still valid. Colonel Cooney read the letter, looked at Tom Doss, looked at Desmond. "You really want to do this, son?" "Yes, sir." "You understand that your unit won't trust you. They'll think you're a coward. And when you get to combat, if you don't perform, I'll personally see to it that you're court-martialed for every man who dies because you didn't have their back." "I'll have their backs, sir. I just won't have a rifle." Cooney approved Desmond's continued service as a non-combatant medic. No weapon, no exceptions. The men of Company B, 1st Battalion, 307th Infantry Regiment, 7th Infantry Division were not happy. Desmond shipped out to the Pacific in March 1945. The 7th Infantry Division had already fought on Guam and Leyte. They were hardened, battle-tested. They knew what war looked like. Desmond had never seen combat. The men didn't talk to him, didn't sit with him at chow, didn't trust him. Sergeant Howell, the same sergeant from basic training, told the squad, "When the shooting starts, Doss will run. Don't count on him. Don't wait for him. He's on his own." April 1st, 1940, Easter Sunday. The 77th Division landed on Okinawa. The island was 80 miles long, heavily fortified, defended by over 100,000 Japanese troops. The Japanese strategy was simple: make the Americans bleed for every inch, draw out the fight, inflict maximum casualties, force a negotiated peace rather than total surrender. The 77th Division's first objective was Hacksaw Ridge, a series of limestone escarpments honeycombed with caves and tunnels, Japanese machine gun nests, mortar positions, sniper hides, natural fortress. April 10th, the attack began. American artillery pounded the ridge for 2 hours. Then the infantry advanced. Company B moved up the slope in staggered lines. 50 yards, 100 yards. Then the Japanese opened fire. Machine guns cut through the lead platoon. Mortar shells walked across the hillside. Men dropped, screamed, bled. Desmond heard the call, "Medic!" He ran forward, not away, toward the fire. Private Glover, the same man who'd beaten him in the barracks, was hit, stomach wound, bleeding badly. Glover looked up, saw Desmond, and said, "Don't let me die, Doss, please." Desmond pulled him into a shell crater, applied pressure to the wound, bandaged it, gave him morphine, waited for a lull in the fire, then dragged Glover 50 yards back to the aid station, went back for the next man, then the next, then the next. 11 hours, 15 men evacuated. Desmond didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't stop, just kept running into the fire, pulling men out, running back. When the attack was called off at sunset, Sergeant Howell found Desmond sitting in a crater, hands shaking, uniform soaked in blood that wasn't his. Howell didn't say anything, just handed him a canteen, walked away. That night, the men of Company B started talking to Desmond. Not friendly, but not hostile. They'd seen him run toward the bullets, seen him pull Glover out when everyone thought Glover was dead. Maybe Doss wasn't a coward. Maybe he was just crazy. Over the next 2 weeks, Company B fought its way across Okinawa. Every battle, Desmond was there. No rifle, no helmet half the time. He gave his helmet to wounded men who needed head protection during evacuation. Just his medic bag, his faith, and an absolute refusal to leave a man behind. April 20th, Company B took part in the assault on a heavily defended hilltop, Japanese counterattack at the dawn. Desmond pulled 4 men out of a machine gun kill zone, crawling on his belly, dragging soldiers twice his size. One of those men was Sergeant Howell. Howell had been shot through the thigh. Femoral artery nicked, bleeding out in minutes. Desmond tied a tourniquet, stopped the bleeding, and carried Howell on his back 300 yards to the aid station. Later that day, Howell found Desmond. Stood in front of him, didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "I was wrong about you, Doss. You got more guts than any man in this company." Desmond just nodded. "I'm glad you're okay, Sergeant." But the real test was still coming, May 1st, 1940. The 77th Division received new orders. Take Maeda Escarpment. The men called it Hacksaw Ridge. It was a 400-foot limestone cliff, sheer vertical face, topped with a plateau riddled with Japanese bunkers, caves, and fortified positions. The only way up was cargo nets and rope ladders hung from the cliff face. Intelligence estimated 500 Japanese soldiers on top, dug in, waiting. May 2nd through May 4th, Company B made 3 attempts to take the ridge. Each time they climbed the nets, established a foothold on top, and held for a few hours. Then, Japanese counterattacks drove them back down. Casualties mounted, 30 men killed, 60 wounded. By May 5th, the company was exhausted, down to half strength, but orders were orders. They had to try again. The 4th assault began at 800 hours. Company B climbed the nets, reached the top, pushed inland 200 yards, dug in. For 6 hours they held, fought off 3 counterattacks. Sergeant Howell set up a defensive perimeter. Medics treated the wounded in shell craters. Desmond moved between positions, patching up men, handing out water, praying with soldiers who thought they were going to die. At 1500 hours, the Japanese launched their largest counterattack yet. Artillery barrage, then infantry. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers storming the American position from three sides. The Americans fought hard, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, running low on ammunition. At 1630 hours, Captain Glover gave the order, "Withdraw, get off the ridge, now." The men ran for the cliff edge, scrambled down the nets. Some jumped, some fell, anything to get off that ridge before the Japanese overran them. In the chaos, 75 wounded men were left behind. Some couldn't walk, some were unconscious. Some were in shell craters too far from the cliff edge to reach before the Japanese arrived. By 1700 hours, every able-bodied American soldier was off the ridge. 75 wounded men remained on top. Captain Glover counted heads, realized what had happened, looked at Sergeant Howell. "We have to go back up." "Sir, with respect, that's suicide. The Japanese controlled the plateau. We'd be cut down before we reached the wounded." "So we just leave them?" Nobody answered. Desmond was standing 20 feet away, listening. He walked over to the cliff base, looked up. The cargo nets were still there, hanging from the top. He picked up a rope, 150 feet of cargo line, tied one end to a tree. Sergeant Howell saw him. "Doss, what are you doing?" "Going back up, Sergeant." "You'll be killed." "Maybe. But those men up there will definitely die if nobody helps them." "Doss, that's an order. Stand down." Desmond looked at Howell. "I'm a conscientious objector, Sergeant. I don't follow orders to kill, but I'll follow orders to save. And right now, my conscience says those men need me." He slung the rope over his shoulder and started climbing the cargo net. Captain Glover watched him go, turned to Howell. "If he makes it back down alive, I'm recommending him for the Medal of Honor." Desmond reached the top of the cliff at 1730 hours. The sun was setting, long shadows across the plateau, smoke from burning equipment, bodies everywhere, American and Japanese. He could hear Japanese voices 50 yards away, searching the battlefield, finishing off the wounded. Desmond moved low, crawling. He found the first wounded man in a shell crater, Private Herbert Schechter, leg wound, unconscious from blood loss. Desmond checked his pulse. Still alive. He wrapped the rope around Schechter's chest, tied a bowline knot, a knot that wouldn't tighten under load, and lowered him over the cliff edge. The drop was 400 feet. Desmond paid out rope hand over hand. His palms burned, the rough hemp dug into his skin. But he kept lowering, kept praying, "Lord, help me get one more." At the bottom, medics received Schechter, untied him, tugged the rope twice, signal, ready for the next one. Desmond pulled the rope back up, went searching for the second man. Private Clarence Glenn, stomach wound, barely conscious. Desmond bandaged him as best he could, tied the rope, lowered him down, prayed again, "Oh, one more, Lord, just one more." This became the rhythm of the night. Find a man, bandage, lower, pray. The Japanese were everywhere. Desmond hid between corpses when patrols passed. Once, a Japanese soldier stepped over him. Desmond held his breath, played dead. The soldier moved on. Desmond kept going. By 2100 hours, he'd lowered 23 men. His hands were shredded. Blood soaked through his gloves. But he didn't stop. Every time he lowered a man, he prayed the same prayer. "One more. Help me get one more." At 22:30 hours, he found Sergeant Howell. Howell was in bad shape. Shot through the leg again, same leg as before, bone visible through the wound. He was unconscious, barely breathing. Desmond worked fast, tourniqueted the leg, splinted it with a rifle stock, wrapped the rope around Howell's chest, started lowering. Halfway down, the rope snagged on an outcropping. Desmond pulled, adjusted. The rope slipped. Howell dropped 3 feet, then caught. The jolt woke him. He screamed. Japanese voices shouted, "Close, too close." Desmond lowered faster, hand over hand, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood, just lowering, praying. Howell reached the bottom. The rope tugged twice. Desmond pulled it back up, moved on. 37 men, 42, 51. Around 200 hours, Desmond found Private Ralph Baker. Baker had been hit by a grenade, both legs mangled. He was awake in agony. "Doss, Jesus Christ, Doss, you came back." "I'm getting you out, Ralph. You shouldn't have come back. You'll die up here. Maybe, but you won't." Desmond lowered him, prayed, pulled the rope back up. By 0400 hours, dawn was approaching, light was coming, and light meant Japanese snipers would have clear shots. Desmond had one more man to find. He'd counted 74 lowered, but he knew there were 75 wounded. Someone was still up here. He found him in a crater near the eastern edge of the plateau. Private James Doss, chest wound, unconscious, barely alive. Desmond checked the wound, sucking chest wound, lung collapsed. Doss needed a hospital, not a battlefield medic. But Desmond bandaged him anyway, tied the rope, started lowering. That's when the Japanese grenade landed. Desmond heard it hit the ground 3 feet away. He dove, but the explosion caught his legs. Shrapnel tore through his left calf and right thigh. He fell, hit the dirt. Pain screamed through his body. He looked down, blood everywhere, bone visible in his calf. But the rope was still in his hands, and Doss was still on the other end. Desmond gritted his teeth, kept lowering, hand over hand, ignoring the pain, ignoring the blood, just lowering. When the rope tugged twice, Desmond collapsed. He lay there for a moment, staring at the sky. Dawn was breaking. He could see Japanese soldiers moving toward him, 50 yards, 40, 30. He tried to stand, couldn't. His legs wouldn't hold him. He started crawling toward the cliff edge, dragging himself. 6 feet, 10 feet, 15. The cargo net was 20 feet away. A burst of machine gun fire kicked up dirt next to him. The Japanese had spotted him. Desmond pulled himself forward, grabbed the net, started descending one-handed. His left arm barely worked. Shrapnel had grazed his shoulder. He made it 10 feet down when his grip failed. He fell. The net caught him, tangled around his legs. He hung there, upside down, 30 feet above the ground. Below, American soldiers saw him, started climbing up, grabbed him, cut the net, lowered him down. Desmond hit the ground, looked up at Sergeant Howell, bandaged, leaning on a crutch, staring at him. "How many, Doss?" "75, Sergeant." "Jesus Christ." Desmond closed his eyes. "Thank you, Lord. That's all of them." Desmond spent 2 weeks in a field hospital. Doctors removed shrapnel from his legs, shoulder, and arm. He'd lost significant blood, developed an infection. They thought he might lose the leg. But Desmond refused amputation, said God had work for him to do. The infection cleared. While he recovered, something happened on Hacksaw Ridge, May 6th. The 77th Division launched another assault. This time, they took the ridge, held it, and when they searched the plateau, they found the evidence of what Desmond had done. Blood stains every few yards, rope fibers on the cliff edge, bandage wrappers scattered across the battlefield, and 75 men who would have died. Captain Glover submitted the paperwork for the Medal of Honor. Sergeant Howell wrote a witness statement. So did every man Desmond had saved. The recommendation went up the chain. Battalion, regiment, division, corps, army. Usually, Medal of Honor recommendations took months, sometimes years. Sometimes they were denied. Desmond's was approved in 6 weeks, October 12th, at the White House. Washington, D.C. President Harry Truman stood on the South Lawn with a crowd of reporters and military brass. Desmond stood beside him, still thin, still recovering, wearing his dress uniform with no combat infantryman's badge, just a medic's cross. Truman read the citation. Private First Class Desmond T. Doss distinguished himself by conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as a company aide man with the 307th Infantry, 7th Infantry Division near Urasuo-Mura, Okinawa, Ryukyu Islands on May 5th, 1940. The citation detailed the night on Hacksaw Ridge, the 75 men, the grenade, the refusal to leave anyone behind. When Truman finished, he placed the Medal of Honor around Desmond's neck. Private Doss, I've given out dozens of these medals, but I've never been more proud to give one than I am right now. You proved that courage doesn't require a weapon, it requires character, and you have more character than any soldier I've ever met. Desmond shook his hand. Thank you, Mr. President, but I didn't do it alone. God was with me, for everyone. Truman smiled. I believe he was. The press took photographs. The ceremony ended. Desmond went home to Virginia. He married Dorothy Schutte, his sweetheart from before the war. They had one son. Desmond Jr. lived quietly in Lynchburg. Desmond worked as a carpenter, went to church every Saturday, never talked much about the war, but the men he saved never forgot. Every year on May 5th, letters arrived at Desmond's house from the men, from their wives, from their children, thanking him, reminding him that their families existed because he'd climbed back up that cliff. By the time Desmond died in 2006, those 75 men had over 200 direct descendants. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. 200 lives that wouldn't exist if Desmond had followed orders and stayed off that ridge. Desmond Doss remains the only conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor for actions in World War II. His story challenged everything the military thought about courage, faith, and duty. The bowl and knot system he used to lower wounded soldiers from Hacksaw Ridge is now taught in Army combat medic training. Field Manual 42511, Section 2-10, Improvised Casualty Lowering Systems. It credits Doss's technique as the foundation. The 77th Infantry Division went on to fight in the Philippines. Desmond served with them until tuberculosis, contracted from unsanitary conditions on Okinawa, forced his medical discharge in 1904 as he lost a lung, spent years in VA hospitals, but he never regretted climbing that cliff. In 2004, at age 85, Desmond returned to Okinawa with a group of veterans. They climbed Hacksaw Ridge, now called Maeda Escarpment again. Peaceful, overgrown with trees. Someone asked him, "What were you thinking when you climbed back up?" Desmond thought for a long moment. Then, "I wasn't thinking. I was praying, and God kept answering. One more." He died 2 years later, March 23, 2006, age 87. Buried with full military honors at Chattanooga National Cemetery. His Medal of Honor is on display at the National Museum of the United States Army in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. Next to it, the rope, the same cargo line he used that night, still stained with blood, still tied in a bowline knot. And if you visit on May 5th, the anniversary of Hacksaw Ridge, you'll see 75 flowers laid at the base of the display, one for each man, one for each life, one for each prayer answered.